The wind was different on Threxel Ridge. It wasn't the cold bite of the upper glaciers or the dry heat of the desert plains that made it strange. It was the way it carried sound, or rather, how it refused to. The ridge had its own silence, a hush so thick it settled over bones and skin like ancient dust. Even the birds, normally shrieking high over the purple crags of Cerulus 3, did not fly there. Nothing dared. Nothing lived there anymore. Nothing except the dragon. And that was enough. The people of New Cantor's outpost had learned quickly. Don't look toward the ridge, don't talk about the ridge, and under no circumstance should anyone, under any conditions, wander near the ridge. That was the way. The unspoken law. It had stood for 30 years now, ever since the dragon came. Only one person ever broke the silence of that memory. Her name was Mara. She was 10, and small like a bird's shadow when the sun was high, all elbows and knees, with hair the color of copper wiring and a voice she hadn't quite grown into. Most children her age learned to stay quiet and careful, trained by the wary eyes of their parents, worn thin by the sharp claws of old tragedies. But Mara was born after the burning. To her, the dragon wasn't fear. It was mystery. She would sit for hours atop the water tower on the south edge of the settlement, a battered pair of army surplus goggles pushed back in her tangle of curls, peering toward the distant knife edge of mountains. She didn't see smoke. She didn't hear roars. She saw blue, soft streaks of shimmering cobalt beneath the clouds, like someone had taken a brush to the sky and forgotten to stop. Sometimes, if she was lucky, she saw wings, not moving but there, folded like watchful silence against the craggy rocks. Mara's mother, Eileen, ran the comms post, a job that required focus, attention, and a tolerance for the kind of stress that turned hair white early. Her father had died in the early skirmishes with the outer colonies, and Mara never remembered him beyond the smell of old books and engine grease on his jacket. So she made do with questions, the kind that adults never answer properly. "Why doesn't anyone talk about the dragon?" she asked once. Eileen's fingers paused over the faded keys of the transmitter. "Because it's not our business, Mara." But, no buts. It's not a story, it's not a game, and it's not safe. That was the last time Eileen answered the question. After that, it became one of those things you didn't say out loud. Like the names of the dead. Mara didn't understand the fear. She'd seen the old holos, the blurry, half-burned footage of the beast landing. Wings like dread banners, eyes like lit suns, a voice that shattered concrete and pride in equal measure. She knew about the day the outer sentries burned, how the patrols stopped returning, how the old mines sealed themselves tight in terror. But that was years ago. The dragon hadn't moved since. Nothing burned anymore. Nothing screamed. The silence had simply returned. Everyone called it mercy. Mara called it loneliness. There was something about the shape of the thing when she caught glimpses of it through the battered telescopes scavenged from Old Station. The way it sat, curled inward like something trying to hide its own fire. The bones of its wings trembled with the wind, but they didn't spread. It didn't hunt. It didn't roar. It watched, and not in anger, at least not anymore. More like waiting. That's what caught her. That waiting. One night, she snuck out again. She had a knack for it. Small body, soft steps. The security field didn't even register her weight. She packed a few essentials in her canvas satchel. Water, a pack of synth meal bars, an old beacon flare she wasn't supposed to have, and a doll named Kip that had lost one arm and most of its fabric memory chips. She didn't plan to stay long. She just wanted to see. Up close. She didn't tell anyone, of course. Even she knew what they would say. Or worse, what they wouldn't say. They'd lock her in her room. Maybe worse. On Cerulus 3, defying the fear wasn't rebellious. It was dangerous. It took her 2 hours to climb the outer trail, her fingers scraped and sore from clinging to the shattered cliff rails. Drones no longer patrolled the area. Most of them had been melted in the first month the dragon came. Only broken metal husks remained, half buried in snow, like fallen insects. She passed them in silence, heart hammering so hard she thought the rocks might echo it back to her. And then she saw him. Not through lenses, not in half focus, not imagined. He was there, larger than anything she had ever seen, coiled between three shattered spires of obsidian rock, his body glinting like a night sky cracked open. His scales shimmered with shifting light, violet, navy, flickers of silver like distant stars. One wing dragged against the stone as though heavy, too heavy. The other was tucked tight. His head was bowed low, muzzle resting on folded claws larger than transport trucks. He didn't stir. At first, she thought he might be dead, but then she saw his eye. Just one, barely open. Watching her, Mara froze. She didn't know what to do. All the stories said dragons were monsters, engines of war and flame and hate. But the eye, huge, golden, ringed with strange layered patterns, wasn't cruel. It wasn't even angry. It looked tired. And in that moment, without understanding why, she felt sorry for him. She edged closer. One step, then two. The dragon didn't move. But she noticed something odd. One of his enormous claws was half raised, curled tightly against his side. At first she thought it was part of how he slept, but then she saw the glint of something red. Not flame, not heat, blood. Mara blinked, then looked closer. There was something in his hand, or rather, through it. A massive thorn, longer than her entire arm, jammed through the tender underside of his palm. It was black and twisted, coated in dried blood and resin. The flesh around it pulsed faintly with the dragon's slow heartbeat. He was hurt. Had he always been? Had anyone known? Her heart squeezed. Something about the sight of that injury made her legs move without thinking. "Hey," she whispered. The dragons, I followed her. She stopped beside the wounded claw. Her whole body shook with fear, instinct screaming to run. But something else, something bigger than fear, held her steady. "You're stuck, huh?" she whispered, almost an apology. Is it okay if I help?" That didn't blink, but he didn't stop her either. She reached into her satchel. The flare wasn't any good here, but the emergency cutter, that might work. She found it, fingers trembling, and ignited the blade. A soft hum vibrated through her skin. She hesitated, then stepped forward. The thorn was buried deep. Removing it would hurt. She looked up again into that vast, waiting eye. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she moved. The cutter sliced clean, searing the base of a thorn, and with one firm tug, she yanked the core free. The dragon roared. The sound hit her like a shockwave, hurling her backward and shattering a nearby rock face. Her ears screamed. Her chest burned. But when she opened her eyes, the dragon wasn't attacking. He was simply breathing, deeply, loudly, like something had been torn free from more than just flesh. The eye met hers again, and this time it blinked. A slow, thunderous blink. She thought maybe it was thanks. But before she could be sure, darkness rolled over her like sleep, and Mara fell into it, unconscious before she hit the ground. Mara woke in a field of light. For one confused moment, she thought she died. The sky was too blue, the wind too soft. The air didn't smell like rock and dust, but something sweeter, like warm pine, like something that couldn't exist on Cerealis 3. But as she sat up, blinking against the haze, the illusion broke. She was still on the ridge. The sky was just as gray and sharp-edged as before. The cold had returned. Her hands stung from Frostbite's brush. Kip, her armless doll, lay face down in a patch of crushed moss. And the dragon was gone. No, not gone. Just not where he'd been. His massive form had moved. Not far, but enough to change everything. He lay curled a dozen meters away now, tail stretched along the cliff like a drawn line. His head rested on the ground, watching her. His wounded claw, no longer tightly curled, was outstretched. The thorn was gone. In its place, a deep, puckered wound still oozed dark ichor, but it was healing. He breathed differently now, like he could. Mara stood slowly. The dragon didn't move. She took one hesitant step forward, then another, and then, "Maria!" The scream shattered the silence like a dropped plate. The girl flinched, turned, and saw the glowing blue outline of an atmospheric glider veering into the canyon's edge. The sleek recon craft didn't even land. It hovered, roaring against the wind, its beacon light flashing frantically. "Maria! Down! Get away from it!" It was Island. Her voice amplified through the external calms, sharp with panic, brittle with fury. Mara opened her mouth to explain, but then something happened. The dragon shifted. Not fully, not aggressively, but his head rose just slightly, eyes narrowing toward the glider. Not angry, but aware. He was no longer hiding. The outpost's silent fear had awakened again. The glider opened fire. Mara screamed, not because she was afraid of the dragon, but because she knew what the others saw. They saw a monster rising, not a wounded creature, not a living being in pain, just fire and terror and wings. "No, stop," she cried, waving her arms. Too late. The sonic cannon discharged with a thunderous boom, and the shot slammed into the ridge just meters from the dragon's flank, sending molten stone spraying like shrapnel. The dragon snarled, not in rage but pain, and jerked backward, wings flaring instinctively. The sheer power of his movement was overwhelming. Air exploded from beneath him. The ground shook. Boulders shattered. Mara fell to her knees, shielding her face as the dragon lifted one clawed foot, a low rumble building in his throat. "And no," she screamed again, throwing herself between the glider and the dragon. "Don't hurt him." Tom seemed to pause. The dragon's foot hovered in the air. The glider swerved. And then the dragon stopped. With an eerie grace that defied his size, he folded his wings, lowered his head, and stepped away. The glider's engine screamed as it pulled upward and banked back toward the outpost. Mara was alone again. Almost. The dragon's massive head lowered until his muzzle was inches from her face. She didn't move, not even to breathe. His golden eyes locked onto hers. In them, she saw something more ancient than war, older than fear, gratitude, and perhaps curiosity. Then he turned. With a slow, deliberate motion, he began to climb the ridge beyond, toward a deeper part of the mountain no one from the outpost had ever dared map. His wings dragged behind him, heavy like sorrow. He didn't fly. He disappeared, and Mara cried. By the time the glider returned to the outpost with Mara, all hell had broken loose. Island was shaking so hard she couldn't speak, alternating between clutching Mara to her chest and screaming at the outpost council over the local channel. Medics scanned Mara for radiation, trauma, neural imprint shocks, everything but what mattered. "I helped him," Mara kept trying to explain. "He was hurt. That's why he never left." But no one listened. They weren't interested in help. They were interested in what the dragon would do next. In the days that followed, surveillance drones were deployed for the first time in 20 years. They circled the ridge like vultures. The outpost council went into emergency session. Military chatter filled the public channels. His movement patterns changed. He's alert. He's watching. We need to consider a preemptive strike. Mara paced in her room, ears pressed to the wall, listening. Island had locked her in. "Just for safety," she said. "Just for a little while." But Mara wasn't stupid. She knew what that meant. They were afraid. And afraid people did dangerous things. She had to do something. She had to talk to him. He'd trusted her. She'd seen it. And now they were going to kill him. She waited until the second moon rose. Then, quietly, with practiced ease, she opened the vent grate behind her bed and slipped out again. The ridge called her like it always had. But this time, it wasn't mystery. It was urgency. She moved faster than before, her hands surer on the broken railings, her bag packed with real supplies this time. A full med kit, a pulse lantern, nutrient packs, and a weather cloak that half dragged on the ground behind her. The first drone spotted her near the edge of the crags. "Unauthorized presence," it announced. "Please return to outpost." She flung a stone at it and bolted. It didn't follow. Recon only. No enforcement. She found the trail again. And she called. "Hey," she shouted into the wind. "Dragon?" "I came back." Nothing. She wandered farther than before. Up paths her feet weren't made for. Through ravines and over broken stone bridges older than any human presence on Ceralis 3. Past old mining markers from when the ridge had still been exploited. Long before the burning. Hours passed. She started to think he wasn't coming. And then she heard it. Not a roar. Not wings. A groan. Low. Trembling. Like the mountain itself was aching. She turned a corner and found him. He was lying in a shallow basin carved by time and wind, the stars of his scales dimmer than before. His wounded hand was pressed to his side, and a strange fluid, thicker than blood, golden and viscous, was leaking from under his breastplate scales. "No," she whispered, rushing forward. "No, no, no." She dropped to her knees beside him, the medkit snapping open. She didn't know if it would help. Nothing in it was designed for dragons. But she had to try. The dragon lifted his head, eyes unfocused. He rumbled. Not words, but not random sound either. There was meaning in the pitch. Sadness. Something like, "Why did you come back?" She touched his scaled cheek with her hand. "Because you didn't hurt me, and now they think you're going to hurt them." He blinked slowly. She reached into the medkit and pulled out a compression injector. It was meant for humanoid muscle lacerations, but maybe the formula would still work. She glanced at the scale, covering his wound. Too thick. It had to be removed first. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she pressed the blade to the base of the plate and began to saw. The dragon didn't roar this time. He just watched her, with quiet endurance, with pain and trust. Half an hour passed. She pulled the scale free and gasped. Beneath it, embedded deep in his chest, was another thorn. This one jagged, blackened, burning with strange red light. Not wood, not metal, something else entirely. And worse, it was growing. The wound pulsed with a dark rhythm. This was what had poisoned him. Not just the injury, but the thing buried inside. She reached for it, then stopped. A noise echoed through the canyon. Not wind, not rockfall. Engines. Multiple. Mara turned and saw a fleet of recon craft descending toward the basin. 5 of them, armed. Headlights glaring. Weapons powered. Target acquired. The speakers boomed. Dragon's signature confirmed. "No," she breathed. She looked up at the dragon. He didn't rise. He was too weak. "Mara Voss," came her mother's voice over the channel, cracking with desperation. "Get away from that thing." Mara didn't answer. She looked down at the burning thorn, then up at the gliders. Then she did the only thing that made sense in that moment. She grabbed the burning thorn with both hands and pulled. The sky exploded. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever known. Mara didn't scream. She couldn't. The moment her hands wrapped around the burning, alien thorn embedded in the dragon's chest, a surge of something alive shot through her body. It wasn't fire or lightning. It was thought, intention, her mind filled with blinding images. Flash after flash, alien cities crumbling into flame, ancient skies torn by winged beasts, worlds made of glass and impossible symmetry. And at the center of it all, a void, a hole where something should have been. A hunger, a presence so vast it made stars look like dust. And it was watching her. Her vision went white. When she came to, she wasn't lying on rock. She was floating in a vast, black space, stars spinning slowly above, as if the cosmos itself had paused to examine her. Her limbs felt distant. Her voice was gone. The dragon was beside her, not the wounded, grounded titan she knew, but something more. His wings stretched for kilometers. His scales shimmered like constellations. He looked at her and spoke, but not with words, not even with thoughts, with understanding. "Little one, you pulled it free, Colin." Mara tried to respond. Her mouth didn't work. Her body felt like smoke. "You saw it, didn't you? The thorn wasn't a weapon. It was a gate, Colin." "A gate?" The word echoed through her skull like a gong. "Gate to what?" "They wanted me to open it. I refused. They buried it in me anyway. The pain kept me grounded, sleeping. But now," his form dimmed for a moment. A ripple passed through the space. "Now you carry the key, Colin." Suddenly, she saw herself, her real self, kneeling again beside the dragon's body. Her small hands gripped the burning shard, now pulled halfway from his chest. Her eyes glowed red, unnatural. Her veins pulsed with alien light. She wasn't just touching the thorn. She was connected to it. And it was using her. "No, stop." Her voice tore through the void, finally freed. The dragon's presence shivered. "You must let go, before it roots in you. It feeds on life, on memory. That's why it was left in me. But you are smaller. It will devour you faster, Colin." Her hands in the real world trembled. She saw her fingernails blackening. The skin on her forearms began to blister. But she didn't let go. "I can't," she sobbed. "It'll kill you if I stop, and it will kill you if you don't, colon." A pulse of white-hot pain exploded through her chest. Her mind buckled. She was 10 years old. She didn't understand alien gates, or ancient hungers, or why the world was suddenly so broken. She just knew she didn't want the dragon to die. He had looked at her like she mattered, like she wasn't just a lost little girl, and she wasn't ready to give that up. But her grip faltered. The shard twisted in her hands, suddenly alive, as if realizing its host was weak. It surged upward along her arms, seeking purchase along her spine, her nerves, her thoughts. Her mouth opened in a silent cry as her vision blurred again. Then something slammed into her. Hard. A rush of wind. Screaming metal. A blinding flash of light. Mara was thrown backward, landing hard against the canyon wall. Her lungs seized. Her bones screamed. Her vision filled with red stars. Through the haze, she saw a figure crouched between her and the dragon. Her mother, Island, in a heavy enviro suit, her face pale and wild behind the visor. She had tackled Mara away from the shard's grasp. One hand was clenched around a containment unit, glowing blue and humming dangerously. In the other, a portable arc cannon. "Don't move," Island shouted, aiming the weapon at the now fully exposed Thorn still embedded in the dragon's chest. Mara coughed. "No, Mom, don't." But it was too late. The arc cannon fired. A focused stream of compressed plasma struck the shard. The effect was immediate and terrible. The Thorn screamed, not audibly, but in the mind. Every person in the canyon, every soldier, every pilot still circling above, heard it. A high, jagged shriek of pure malice. The shard twisted violently. The dragon roared, not in pain but release. The wound around the Thorn exploded outward in a cascade of molten ichor. And the gate, whatever it was, opened. Just a crack, just a sliver. But through that gap came a storm. The sky didn't tear, but it folded. Space bent inward. A single shape emerged, blacker than shadow, with no edges, no face, just presence. Wrongness. It hovered in the air above the basin, watching. It had no eyes, but it watched. Every drone nearby dropped out of the sky. Every glider powered down. Every soldier collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads. Island screamed. The arc cannon sparked and burst in her hand. The containment unit shattered. Mara could feel the entity's attention turning toward her. Not the dragon. Her. Because she had touched the Thorn. Because it had marked her. Because now the gate was inside her. "No," she whispered, staggering to her feet. The shadow entity moved. Not fast, just closer. Like a thought. Like gravity. The basin grew colder. The dragon stirred. He rose, slowly, shakily, massive wings spreading wide. Scales fell from his body like dying leaves. He looked at the creature, then at Mara. "Run, little one, colon." "No," she shouted. "You can't fight that thing." "I must, colon." The dragon's wings beat once, lifting him into the air. His body, though broken, seemed to grow larger, more luminous. A deep gold light began to glow from within him, spreading outward across his wounded chest. He charged. The entity met him. The collision didn't make a sound. It made a hole. The space between them vanished. For a moment, all light bent toward that single point. Then, they were gone. The wind returned. The stars blinked back into place. And Mara collapsed, unconscious. When she woke, she was back in the outpost med bay. Her arms were bandaged. Her hair smelled like burnt copper. The lights were dimmed, but she could see Island asleep in the chair beside her bed, one hand still wrapped around Mara's. She sat up. She remembered everything. The Thorn, the gate, the entity, the dragon. She glanced toward the window. Beyond it, the mountains stood silent. The dragon was gone, but so was the thing that had tried to come through. And whatever had happened out there, she had survived it. Barely. Her body ached. Her memories itched. But she was whole, until she looked at her hand. In the center of her palm, where she had gripped the Thorn, was a scar. Not a burn, not a cut. A symbol. Faint, faintly glowing. A circle of thorns. And at its center an eye. Not human. Not dragon. Just watching. She wasn't dreaming. Not this time. Mara sat upright in her bed, the sweat-drenched sheets twisted around her legs, staring at the mark on her hand. The eye inside the ring of thorns no longer glowed, but it pulsed. Faintly, like a second heartbeat. Like it was waiting. Island stirred beside her, still half asleep in the hospital chair. "Mom," Mara whispered, her voice hoarse. "He's not dead." Island blinked awake slowly, rubbing her eyes, still clinging to the last memory of seeing her daughter wrapped in plasma burns. "What, honey?" "The dragon. He's alive, but he's trapped. Somewhere else." Her mother sat upright now, worry darkening her face. "Mara, I saw it. When the thorn opened the gate, it didn't just destroy him. It pulled him. That thing, it didn't die. It retreated, and he followed it to stop it. It's still trying to get through." Island opened her mouth to object, but the wall screen behind them flickered. A static burst split the silence, and then a low-frequency tremor rolled through the station. The lights dimmed. The nurses didn't react. None of the other patients stirred. But Mara felt it. Something called her. She stood on shaking legs. "Mara, wait, where are you going?" "The canyon." Island tried to stop her, but as soon as Mara's hand brushed the medbay door, it opened of its own accord. All down the corridor, doors began sliding open ahead of her, like the station itself was responding to her presence. Her mother followed, eyes wide with rising fear. "You're not healed yet. This could be brain damage, sweetie. You're hallucinating." Mara didn't answer. She walked barefoot through the long hallway and out into the night. The stars above were clear, but there was something wrong with the sky. It rippled at the edges, distorted, as if reality had begun to fray. And at the center of the canyon, where the dragon had once fallen, there was now a sphere of black mist, floating 10 meters above the ground. It hummed. A gravity well. A gate. Still open. The thing had never left. It was just waiting. For her. "Mara." Island caught up, grabbing her arm. "Stop. What are you doing? This is over. He's gone. You barely survived." "No," she said quietly. "I didn't survive." Island froze. "I was marked," Mara whispered, eyes filled with tears. "It touched me, and now it wants me. It left a door in me. I can feel it pulling, but I also feel him. The dragon. He's still fighting it, holding the rest of it back." She stepped toward the black sphere. "You can't go near that," her mother screamed. "We called the Union Science Authority. They're sending warships. You just have to wait. Let them handle it." "They can't." Mara looked back at her with heartbreak in her young eyes. "That thing isn't physical. It's not something you shoot or blast. It's thought, and it's still here because I'm here." She paused, "And because he still needs help." Before Island could stop her, Mara stepped into the gate and vanished. She didn't fall. She floated, weightless, timeless. There was no light here, but she could see everything. Endless strands of thought, like rivers of language and memory, coiling through a storm of shadows. Her body was gone. She was mine alone. And at the center of the storm, he was there. The dragon. Cracked, bleeding light, but alive. He was locked in combat with a shape that constantly changed, a predator of shifting geometry, a tangle of predatory concepts, too large to see and too fast to follow. It struck at him, not with claws, but with history, with illusion, with waves of anti-thought. It tried to make him doubt himself, to unmake him with forgotten truths. And he roared back, pushing through it all. Wings of memory, talons of unbreakable will. But he was losing. The gate had fed it too long. "Little one, you should not have come." Mara projected her thoughts. Not words, but clarity. "You're not alone anymore." She reached for him. The moment her mind brushed his, everything changed. Her body returned. Not flesh, but a radiant silhouette. Her scar burned bright. The thing turned. It saw her. And it screamed, not in fear, in delight. Because now, the key was here. The whole key. It lunged. Time shattered. Thought collapsed. Mara felt 1,000,000,000 memories flood her. Some hers, some from others, some ancient and lost. She saw Earth's first spark. She saw dying stars birthing new life. She saw dragons flying between galaxies. She saw this thing, older than existence, hiding in the forgotten corners of reality, waiting for cracks. And now it had one. Mara stood her ground. She held out her hand. The scar burst open and became a blade, forged from memory, from pain, from all she had seen and learned. The thing struck. She cut through it. The blade didn't touch matter. It sliced meaning. It undid the creature's presence, erasing its shape, collapsing its impossible structure. It shrieked, less powerful now, less sure. The dragon surged beside her. Together, they pushed it back. Each blow struck by the dragon carved space into light. Each swing of Mara's blade redefined reality, forcing the creature's thoughts into form, then breaking them. But still fought. It wrapped itself around her, squeezing, corrupting, whispering truths. That she was nothing. That she was small. That humanity was a flicker in the wind of time. That she could not win. And she believed it. For one terrible moment, she believed it. Until a voice, not hers, not the dragon's, but her mother's. Mara, you matter. She remembered the first time Island had held her. The story she'd told. The quiet moments. The courage. The humanity. She screamed, and her blade changed. It became a reflection of Earth's will. The spirit of every song, every story, every impossible fight humanity had ever won. And in that moment, she was not alone. She was us. Every human who had ever fought for light in the darkness. And she struck the thing down. Not with rage, with truth. You don't get to win, she said. The blade pierced its center, its first thought, and shattered it. The creature collapsed. Not into death. Into nothing. Gone. Unmade. The storm broke. The void split. And the gate closed. Mara awoke in the canyon once again, this time curled at the foot of a great stone. But the stone breathed. The dragon lay beside her, not glowing, not monstrous, just resting. Quiet. Free. He opened one golden eye. You brought me back, Colin. No, she whispered. We brought each other. He lowered his head beside her. She leaned into his warm scales, and for the first time, the canyon felt peaceful. The sky was whole. The gate was gone, but something in her had changed. The mark had faded, but not vanished. And somewhere, deep in the fabric of the universe, she felt other gates, other thorns, waiting. But now, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The sun broke over the rim of the canyon, golden and soft, filtering through the last wraiths of morning mist. Light touched stone, then scale, then skin, warming everything it reached. The battle was over, and the world had changed. Mara sat cross-legged beside the sleeping dragon, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. His great wings, once battered and blackened, now shimmered faintly, quiet hints of ancient color returning to the membrane as light healed what darkness had tried to break. He had not spoken since the gate collapsed. Not with words, not with thoughts, but with presence. His aura no longer burned with barely contained fury or torment. Instead, it pulsed in gentle waves of contentment, exhaustion, and something almost foreign from a creature so feared. Gratitude. He had stayed by her side through the night. Mara's mother had come running when the flare of energy had dissipated. Island had sprinted through the newly scorched grass, expecting ash, destruction, death, but found only her daughter, resting against the belly of a great dragon like a child cuddled beside an old dog. It had taken every ounce of Island's will not to scream, not in fear, in awe, because this was not the same beast the world had feared, nor was this the same daughter she had raised. They had both changed, and everyone could see it. By noon, half the research colony had gathered around the canyon's edge, security drones, administrators, scientists, and a few of the curious, trembling children Mara once went to class with. None dared step forward. They whispered. They watched, but they did not interfere. The creature no longer radiated threat. Instead, the dragon's mere existence seemed to hold the land still. Not like a tyrant demanding obedience, but like an ancient guardian standing vigil over a place sacred and reborn. and beside him sat the girl who once cried in her bunk over feeling small. Mara finally spoke near midday, breaking the long silence. "Do you have a name?" she asked quietly, not turning her head. The dragon's eye cracked open, gold gleaming. "I've had many, but the first I remember was Eronth, : She tried saying aloud. "Eronth," she echoed. "That's beautiful." It meant last ember once, in a language your species has not heard for eons, : She smiled faintly, tracing a circle in the dirt with her finger. "I think I like it better than monster." "So do I, : There was silence again, but now it was companionable. Mara looked up at the sky. "I felt them, before the gate closed. Other gates, other thorns. Yes. The creature we fought was only one echo of the original. It fled through the weakness between realities. When the Union found this world and pierced its crust for mining, they cracked more than just stone, : She turned. "You knew." "I suspected. It was why I stayed. Why I raged. Why I howled. The thorn in my hand was never mine. It was a mark from the first time I encountered it. I could not remove it alone, but I knew one day someone would come who could, : She hesitated. "Why me?" Eronth's breath stirred dust and grass. "Because only something new could challenge something so old. The thing we fought fed on doubt and decay. But you were full of wonder. And when you touched my wound, you gave me what I had long forgotten, : Mara frowned. "What?" "Hope, : A soft breeze passed. Then a new sound. Engines." She looked up. 3 Union shuttles approached the canyon rim. Their wings flared as they landed, raising cyclones of dust. Troopers in light armor emerged, flanked by tall scientists and a single, high-ranking officer in a dark uniform with red stripes. Island stood protectively in front of her daughter as they approached. The lead officer scanned the dragon. "It's real," he muttered, then cleared his throat. "I am Marshal Varen of the Union Defense Corps. Stand down. We are not here to harm anyone." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Good, because you won't get far if you try." Varen studied her for a long time. "You're the girl who touched the anomaly." "I fought the anomaly. I closed the gate." "You're late." A few of the soldiers smirked. Varen knelt slightly. "We've been monitoring this planet for years. You just did something we didn't think possible." "I'm 10, Mara said. "You've had warships and scientists for decades. What's your excuse?" He stared at her, then gave a reluctant smile. "Point taken." One of the scientists stepped forward cautiously. "That mark on your hand. May we study it?" Mara looked at the fading sigil. "No." Varen raised an eyebrow. She added, "You can ask questions, but it's not something to be put in a lab. It's a promise." "To who?" She looked at the dragon beside her, then back at the horizon. "To whoever's next." That evening, the Union didn't evacuate the planet. They didn't deploy weapons or sterilize the site. They listened. For once, they asked questions instead of giving orders. And Mara, calmly, clearly, told them the truth. About the gate, about the creature, about Eroth, about the other marks in the cosmos. It wasn't until nightfall that Varen asked the last question. "Will you help us find the other thorns?" Eronth raised his head slightly, watching the firelight dance in the human's eyes. Mara tilted her head. "Help," she repeated. "We'll lead." The next year became legend. The child and the dragon, explorers of the stars. The first human to bond with a creature older than light itself. Together, they traveled aboard Union vessels, mapping the faint echoes of wrongness that had begun to whisper through remote moons and forgotten ruins. The thorns had been scattered by something even older than Eroth, and each one they found had changed someone, twisted a thought, turned a dream into something darker. But Mara and Eroth were no longer unprepared. She wielded a blade of meaning. He carried the memory of every battle fought by his kind. Together, they didn't just fight. They healed. And slowly, the galaxy began to believe again. Back on the canyon world, now designated Ember's Gate, a monument was built, not of steel or marble, but of scorched stone and flowering vines, untouched by tools. Just beside it, grass grew taller where a child once sat beside a beast. Inscribed at the base were words written in a dozen tongues: human, draconic, Union standard. Even the wildest rage, may hide a wound. Even the smallest hand may heal it. But if you came there at night, in the wind-swept quiet, you might still hear the rustle of wings and the echo of laughter. And sometimes, a tear in the stars, waiting to be closed. Years passed, then decades, and still, the story of the little girl and the dragon refused to fade. Mara Voss and Aeroth, the last ember, had become the nucleus of a movement that rippled across the stars. Together, they had charted 37 anomalies, each one sealed, studied, or neutralized, not with brute force or endless research, but with the same simple principle that had first saved them both. Connection. Mara had never been trained for diplomacy. She wasn't bred for command. She didn't carry the rank of a Union general or the influence of a planetary governor. But across 1,000 systems, she was known by another title, Thornbreaker. In ancient languages and newborn dialects, the title echoed. On worlds where twisted gates had once devoured moons, her name became legend. On fractured colonies and drifting arcs, children told stories of the human girl who touched a monster's heart and changed its fate. No longer just a survivor, Mara was now a symbol. But the galaxy never stopped turning, and not all saw her as a savior. In the 5th cycle after the Ember's Gate's sealing, a quiet resistance stirred in the outer sectors. They called themselves the Pure Constellum, a collective of old empires and zealots who believed the Thorns were not threats, but divine trials. They whispered that Aeronth was a traitor to his own kind, that Mara had stolen something sacred. They lit fires on ice moons and etched their creed into rusting hulls. Let the Thorn fester, for only then can we be remade. It was madness, but spread, because some preferred chaos. Some needed the old scars, and in response to Mara's healing, they grew louder, more violent. She and Aeronth answered when necessary, but they never burned unless provoked. Still, it became clear. Hope and horror often grow in the same soil. When Mara turned 25, she stepped down from active anomaly missions. Not out of weariness, but foresight. She knew her presence, her myth, had begun to eclipse the work. People were following her, not the cause. So she built something greater. The Ember Cord, a living alliance of species, minds, and even once feral beings that had been touched by the Thorns and returned changed, but not ruined. The Accord wasn't a government. It wasn't a religion. It was something in between, a shared promise among civilizations that the oldest wounds could be healed not by conquest or avoidance, but by understanding. They trained empaths and warriors alike. They taught communication not just of speech, but of meaning. And at its center, in orbit above the planet once called Ember's Gate, floated a vast station shaped like a broken spiral, mended at its core by a glowing sigil. The handprint of a child, still pulsing with memory, still warm. Humanity, as a species, had always been underestimated. Too emotional, too impulsive, too fragile. But now, aliens copied their models of diplomacy. Armadas paused before entering war to ask, what would the Thornbreaker have done? On the distant fungal planet of Gyrthal, the sentient mycelium created a neural echo of Mara's empathy and spread it through spore drift. On Racker, where war beasts once devoured each other for territory, new laws were inscribed, bearing a single quote. Even the wildest rage may hide a wound. But for every change Mara inspired, some unintended sparks caught fire. In the ruins of a long-dead AI empire, a thorn sealed by her touch twitched. Just once. Not to awaken. Not yet. But to remember. Because not every gate was closed. Not every scar was healed. And something deeper, older, had been watching. Mara, now gray-haired but still sharp-eyed, stood once more on the cliff above Ember's Gate. She had returned alone, though Aeronth still soared the black, watching, guiding. She placed her hand on the old stone marker, where moss had begun to grow along the inscription. Children of the Accord had painted it with stars and wings. New myths. Mara closed her eyes. She had lived 100 lives in one, fought across gravity wells and neural storms, held a blade of flame against things that hungered for more than flesh, spoke to minds that spanned entire dimensions. But this place, this quiet cliff where a dragon once wept, was where she truly began, and where, one day, she would end. She left something there, nestled in the roots of the oldest tree, a data crystal engraved with her voice, her memories, her truths. Not to be read by the Union, but by whoever came next. Not everyone would believe it, but someone would need it. And that was enough. 50 years after the first gate closed, a child on a backwater mining planet heard a strange call in her dreams. A wordless pull toward a mountain no one climbed. She followed it, climbed for days, and found a crater filled with glassy stone and vines. At its center lay a smooth metal disc with a pulsing symbol. A handprint. Small. Familiar. The girl pressed hers to it. The disc glowed, and above, the sky shimmered, just for a moment, as a tear in the stars whispered open, awaiting its next thornbreaker. The universe never forgot the day a human girl touched a dragon and healed a wound no weapon could. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, but one phrase remained whispered among the stars, words spoken in defiance, in hope, in unbreakable will. Human, don't stop.